Ariel, thank you for joining us at the 21st Annual Tallgrass Film Festival. We're so glad you could be with us. I have seen your film, and there are definitely some things I want to ask about, but for those who haven't had the opportunity to see it, what would you like them to know about the piece?
Honestly, the biggest, most important thing to know about our first priority is that it's a horror short, but it is very much in the realm of reality for a lot of people. I chose to create a scenario where a doctor tells a patient it's all in your head, and then the patient has the ability to send the doctor to hell. This is something that I think a lot of us actually have wanted in our lives at some form or fashion at some point. But the thing is that I created a horror context for something that was real life horror for me throughout all of my life, basically, because of having a lot of rare diseases. And so it is something that I think a lot of people can identify with, no matter what your gender, your age, your race. I think a lot of people have this experience when they go to the doctor, whether they realize it or not. So.
And you have a beautiful dedication to your Uncle Jacket. I'm very sorry to hear of his passing, but that was a beautiful dedication in the way you did it, but we're going to leave that as spoiler-free as possible so they will check out the film to see it for themselves. You had a young lead in this. Why did you choose to go that route, and how was that for you working with a younger actress?
Honestly, it was something that I had in my head from a very long time ago. I actually wrote the first version of this script when I was in college, and the original intent was to have a young child at the doctor because I feel like it's easier for an audience to project themselves and their identity onto a child in some ways. And so it's easier for people to sympathize automatically with the child going through the medical trauma in a lot of ways than an adult who you might automatically assume, oh, maybe they're making things up, maybe they're whatever. And so I really felt like creating it as a narrative with a child protagonist was important to me. Violet Gocher, who was the child that I cast in this, had literally never done any performance of any kind of thing ever. She was the face I had in my head. She's my dear friend Rob's daughter, and I just sat down and wrote the script with her face in my head and was like, I don't know that she can do this, but I hope that she can do this. And then I sent the script to her father, and they got really excited about it, and they rehearsed it all the time, and she knocked it completely out of the park. You would never know she had never done this, and now she's into performing in a big way. She's in 5th grade now, and just really doing some beautiful things with performance, and it's stunning to watch.
Well, between the rehearsals and your coaching during the filming, it was an amazing job. I had no idea it was her first.
Yeah.
So she did a really wonderful job with it. And then, of course, you have your other female persona who is a stronger, hardcore, again, I like to be spoiler-free, but they had to carry on, and I saw some mannerisms where they did match up. Was that something you intentionally did, or just beautiful universe was their moment?
Honestly, we did a lot of trying to match their mannerisms in coaching. Our rehearsal process was very short. They actually met on Zoom every week for months because we were shooting during the pandemic when nobody could actually be in the same space for a really long time. And then when we actually did get to shoot, we didn't have much time for rehearsal. But they spent a lot of time over Zoom trying to match each other in terms of mannerisms and so forth. And Jamie Kirsten Howard and Violet Gocher both were absolutely brilliant and really hit it off in a big way and really loved working with each other. And it was beautiful to see the way that they played off of one another in that.
Good. And you did mention this, of course, was done during pandemic. What were some of course, you had to do the Zoom rehearsals, but what were some of the things you had to work around with that because of the time and the world we were in?
I mean, there were a lot of things that we had to play with very carefully. We had a lot of very specific COVID restrictions. Also, because I myself am multiply disabled, there were a lot of accessibility concerns that I had. I was at the time experiencing chronic migraines, so that every single day I was having a migraine. And so I could only work for 4 hours at a time before I would get a horrible migraine. So our set functioned very differently from anyone else's set, because we would work for 4 hours, break for 2 hours, then work for 4 hours more, or whatever needed to get done, to actually finish the shoot. And we found that this was the only model in which we could actually finish the filming that was accessible for me. But then simultaneously with trying to make sure that we were accommodating all of the masking requirements, not having too many people in the room at any one time, all of these things were almost the simplest possible option compared to what I needed for accessibility purposes. And I feel like, honestly, it wouldn't be the product that it is if it weren't for the fact that we created it in a very different way, where everybody's attention was so completely focused on the product.
Excellent. And I found in my research that you are part of Respectability, to fight stigmas, advancing opportunities, develop and elevate talent of diverse professionals with disabilities behind the scenes in TV, film, and stage. Thank you for doing that. I think everyone who wants to be a part should have an opportunity to be a part. Is there anything our viewing audience you'd like to make sure they know about with Respectability?
Well, I think Respectability is such a wonderful organization that specifically does everything it can to make sure that people understand that every role that you have, whether it's cast or crew, could be filled by people with disabilities. And really, you should be considering people with disabilities to fill every possible role that you have on your projects going forward. And I think it's so powerful to have a group like Respectability that advocates in all of those ways. I was a part of their entertainment lab, and I still do some work with them right now, and I'm just so blown away by all of the opportunities that they're creating in a lot of different spaces. But I also feel that it's so important that people understand that between 1 in 4 and 1 in 3 people in the United States has a disability, and you don't see that reflected on screen. We really need to do a better job of portraying the world that we actually live in.
Fully agree. I like that perspective. I also see that you are a very well-educated young lady. You have a BA from William and Mary, which is a fabulous campus, and your master's from George Mason. And you actually have published books for educators. And of course, and you also are into horror. That's one of your genre preferences. And you have a podcast, Ride the Omnibus. You are just and the word just escaped my head of what they called it. You're just well-rounded. You have all of these interests. Do you ever find it hard to focus down into an area where you want to put your attention? Or do you always have all these scripts running and you just kind of temporarily put one to the side and pull one up? And
I'll be very honest. Part of it is my ADD, and the way that my ADD works is that I can only run with one ball for so long before I start thinking about the larger system at work and what does this piece of that system look like, and how do I play with this piece of that system, and how do I improve that, and then wanting to kind of go back to the larger systems thinking and then plug in the other pieces that I think I can fix and that I think I can improve how people are working in these different areas. Because I feel like filmmaking is an enormous system in particular, and I have now I have a film festival called Access Horror where I specifically look at disability and horror. I have my podcast where I do press and I talk to a lot of filmmakers about their processes. And I write my own films, obviously. I produce other people's works. I do a lot of different kinds of things. But to me, it's all a part of the same system where I'm trying to improve not only the lives of my audience members, but then also the lives of everyone I'm working with and collaborating with in different ways, because I want to help people learn new ways to do old things. So.
I like that. It isn't just a matter if it ain't broke. It's what can we do to make this more accessible? Mm-hmm. What got you into horror?
So that's a really great question. What got me into horror was actually, I had a very unique childhood. I was born with a very rare disease called face that meant that the right side of my face was had a birthmark that was red and purple. And so I was called lots of things as a child: monster face, pizza lips, things like this. And it wasn't until I was age 3 and a bad babysitter came over with a bag of weed, her boyfriend, and a VHS of A Nightmare on Elm Street that I knew what a monster was. And so at age 3, I watched Freddy Krueger on screen and I got it. For the first time, I was like, that's what they mean when they call me that. This is what people see. And this is better than all those other things that I've seen about people with disabilities where they have to be martyrs and they have to be perfect all the time. There was this agency in being monstrous because suddenly I had a choice. I could be a monster rather than a martyr, and I could actually choose how I wanted to be in the world. And Freddy Krueger, not anyone's choice for best representation of the year under any set of circumstances, but for me as a disfigured child, he became my avatar and my way of seeing the world. And horror for me was really where I saw power for myself and a way through trauma.
I'm getting goosebumps over here. That is, wow. So we've got your wonderful short here. I believe you have another short out as well, if I remembered correctly.
Well, I actually don't have another I have a few experimental shorts that have been at film festivals and so forth. Nothing in the horror genre has come out yet. I have another short that I've been working on called Shining in the Dark, about a blind projectionist, which I'm really excited about, but we haven't finished shooting on it just because it's kind of complicated trying to get the scheduling together. But I'm also really excited about my documentary feature that I'm working on called Monstrous Me, that's specifically about my relationship identifying with cinematic monsters and using them as a way to explore my own disability identity. So.
Okay. And do you have, so we've got that coming up. If you had unlimited budget, work with anyone you wanted at any point in time, could do whatever project you wanted, do you have one that you would do?
I do.
Who would the dream crew be?
Oh, man. All right. Well, okay. So legit, if I could work with anyone I wanted, I would co-create with Guillermo del Toro the disability and horror version of Tales from the Hood that I want. So
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah. Because I actually did get to meet Guillermo in Portland, Oregon. I had a fellowship with the Portland Art Museum, and I was able to meet him, and he recorded a brief intro for Access Horror, my festival, and was like, oh, disability and horror, these are my people. So I have a feeling that, like, one day this will happen. I'll make it happen. I'm speaking it into existence right here on this interview.
I'm supporting it. I'm supporting it. And I did, of course, I watched your short. You have called it horror. It is not of the slasher variety.
No.
It is the type of, it's the more suspense and thriller. And you made choices, of course, with your music to help support the mood. And I appreciate that type of film. More so than the, oh, let's see how we can do with Cairo corn syrup and make things happen. So I like how you handled and did this and portrayed it, still falling under that horror, but it's not something that's going to gross the audience out.
Yeah.
Is that a line you find you have to walk to make decisions, or you just let things play out how they do, as far as where to take the horror version of it with the slasher line in there?
No, that's a really great question. Like, for me personally, I felt like for my first thing, this is literally the first thing I ever shot in a live action way. And for me, I felt like the first thing that I created needed to be accessible in more ways than one. It needed to be something that people who loved horror and people who didn't love horror could both appreciate. And so while I love a good kill, personally, I recognize that there are a lot of my friends who don't. And I wanted to make sure that the first thing that I made really was about the issues I was trying to explore, and not necessarily, the most gruesome possible way to go. So that was my feeling.
Well, and with the underlying message in this film, I appreciate that you did that, because it also allows me to have other friends I know that face some of that same battle, that, okay, they're like me. We're not into that. I want to be scared so badly we wet ourselves. That I can support them and say, hey, you need to check this film out. When you get a chance, you need to find this. You need to watch this. So I really think there's an opportunity to make some changes to help people from your piece. So I think you've got your message, and it was a beautiful one to do. And I love how you did it.
Thank you so much.
On your nightstand, what do you have?
Well,
books, movies, Netflix. What's your nightstand material?
My nightstand material at the moment is The Future is Disabled, which is an absolutely brilliant book that was written in 2022, specifically in reaction to how the pandemic has been really a mass crippling event, and how we as a society have to kind of contend with that and make peace with the fact that more and more people are becoming disabled, and we need to rely on crip wisdom in different ways. And so that's the book that I've been reading, and is on my nightstand at the Drury Hotel right this moment. So, and in terms of other movies that are on my nightstand, like, typically I have like a huge stack. At the moment, I think it's Lone Wolf and Cub, because it just came from the Criterion Collection, and Wong Kar-wai. But I'm a huge cinephile. I watch every genre you can imagine of anything. So, yeah.
Excellent. And how can we find you? What are your social media handles? Find your podcast. Where do we go to do that? Please share with everyone.
Absolutely. So I'm on arielbaska.com, and you can access all of my world basically from there. Ride the Omnibus podcast is at omnibusride.com. filmmakerarielbaska.com. My Instagram handle is just Aska Baska. So that's usually where I post most of my musings on a daily basis. But this has been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much, Jenn.
I appreciate your time. I will definitely stay following you, and I hope you have the best time you possibly can here at the festival.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.